Hello and welcome to this Championship Chatter Pitch Football Preview Special. Today we're going to be focusing on Hull City and we're joined by two podcasters from To Hull and Back podcast. We've got Ant Nogrews. How you doing, Ant?
I'm all right, mate. Are you?
I'm not too bad, pal. And we've also got Joe. Joe, how you doing?
Yeah, evening, buddy. You all right?
I'm not too bad. I'm gonna get straight into it. A bit of a topsy-turvy season for you last season. You beat some pretty big clubs, but the league position wasn't at its best, was it?
Yeah, it was up and down, really, wasn't it? We had the takeover stuff going on as well. And we've had that for the last 4, 5, 6 years. So it was just a case the fans, what was going on the pitch was what it was, right? We couldn't build with the Allams in charge. There was no way we were going to build and really have any future. Obviously, you could say we went down to League One and bounced straight back, which is big. You've seen some big clubs go down there and really, really struggle. So it was just the case last season, just can we solidify in the Championship, which we did, and then really look at this summer to sort of build and crack on. But yeah, like you said, it was really odd because obviously we had those massive away results. We had Bournemouth, even at Borough late on in the season. So it was really, really up and down. And I think that sort of come with the quality of the squad. You could definitely tell there was some young lads that were really growing, but then in other areas we lacked a little bit of quality, and the results probably showed that.
And for yourself, how did you view last season? Was it a success staying in the Championship after just coming up, or do you think it was more of a building year like Joe did?
Well, I think if you'd have offered Championship safety to any City fan before the season started, we would have taken it. We went up as champions in League One, which was great, but the gap in between the divisions is getting quite larger. And we didn't really have much investment in us from the Allams. So, we weren't coming up, and we had the transfer embargo in the summer, so we could only sign freebies and loanees, and we didn't really have the chance to add any real quality to the squad. So any signings that we made weren't really any improvements on the starting 11, which is always a worry when you're jumping up a division. Yeah. So we've got a young squad. We had a very inexperienced squad. A majority of the fan base had a bit of a Marmite feeling towards Grant McCann, so it was always going to be a bit of a turbulent season in terms of whatever results happened. But I think, considering that we finished relatively safe, securing it with a few games to go, I think the vast majority of the fans would have been happy with that.
Looking at the club as it stands now, obviously you mentioned the Allams there. But with the ownership structure as it currently stands, are you more positive going forward into this season that you can build something special? And we'll go to Ant on that one first.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the problem with the Allams is that the relationship between the fans and the ownership had just really broken down to a point where it was unrecoverable. So they weren't willing to invest, we weren't willing to back them or support them in whatever decisions they made. And it just became a point where the team on the pitch really suffered for it because, they didn't really get the backup that they needed. We didn't get the investment we needed. So the club's kind of went into this downward spiral. And since our last relegation from the Premier League, all it's been really is, shipping away our best assets for a large sum of money and then not seeing it reinvested. So I think as soon as the new ownership came in, around the end of December when it was rumored that it was about to go through, automatically the entire mood of the whole club just lifted. We lost 1-0 against Blackpool, but it was one of the best away games. We knew that something new was coming, and then as soon as it came through, even though the Blackburn, the actual game that it was announced, the Blackburn home game, we won 2-0, and just from that point onwards, it's just we seem to have got our club back in a sense.
Is that how you feel as well, Joe? Do you feel like you do have your club back?
Oh, definitely. I think it's better than anyone could have hoped, because you get a lot of owners that come in and just take a back seat and really don't want to get involved, which can obviously work. But with the relationship that was between the ownership and the fans in the last few years, we really need someone to come in and take a front seat and really speak out and try and get everyone together. And as Ant said straight away, as soon as we knew he was coming in, everyone was sort of more upbeat in that. And I don't think anyone expected how different it could have been. I really believe they're on totally different ends of the spectrum and how they're wanting to run football clubs. Obviously, Aka went on to Sky a couple of times and he was saying some quite big things about his dreams and his plans and stuff. And everyone outside of City were we're looking at him a bit. Do you know what I mean? Not sure, a bit unsure. Is he another one of these that's going to come in, spend a load of money, and put us in a sort of worse position than we were before? But I think if you look at some of the signings we're trying to make this summer, he's not just throwing money around. They are trying to be quite clever and show that they know their stuff when it comes to transfers and the actual football side as well as off the pitch. So it's brilliant, really.
One thing we can talk about is obviously you started out with Grant McCann. You've then moved across to Shota Avraladze. I'm presuming I've got his name right there. I'm pretty sure I've probably butchered it. But Joe, for yourself, how did you feel when he came in?
Yeah, so it was quite sort of exciting, and a lot of people were quite unsure, weren't they? Because he's very unknown. He's only sort of coached in the Far East and quite sort of unique different countries. So it was interesting. As I said earlier, Grant McCann had some fans and some people didn't really like the way he played. And I think with Grant, it was an issue for me personally, is it was quite difficult sometimes to see how he wanted the team to play. And whether that was because he lacked a little bit of quality in different areas, it was hard to get that across. I felt when Shota came in, there was a real change of system, and he really wanted us to sort of try and play from the back and really try and sort of create chances ourselves and not just rely on, let's sit back and just hope that someone gives us something. But then in certain games, obviously we had that Barnsley game that was some of the worst football I've ever seen, but it was because of the individual errors that were being made because of maybe that lack of quality. So there was definitely a change. I felt that I could see what he was trying to do. But then obviously you've got to give a massive, massive amount of respect to Grant McCann and what he did with the very tight budgets and the very tight limitations he had over the last few seasons. And not many managers sort of bounced straight back from League One and did the job he did up to Christmas, because it was going okay. And I think he could have definitely kept us up had he stayed on. But for me, I wanted to almost have a fresh start. Let's look to the future. And I didn't feel like Grant McCann was going to be the future in terms of the long term. And Shota's still up for debate, isn't it? We don't really know what can he do after this summer. I think time will tell, really.
What about for yourself, Ant? Were you glad to see McCann gone, or were you one of the ones that quite liked what he did?
I think if you had a look back at a few of my podcast episodes, I was regularly an advocate for McCann out for a majority of the time. But you know what, I learned to appreciate him more towards the end, and I think especially with hindsight now, like Joe's just mentioned there, when you think about the limitations he had, and he essentially had his hands tied. And you know, the first season he came in, we were near the playoffs, and I mean largely due to the fact that we had Grosicki and Bowen that were both on fire that season. But then the owners turned around and sold them both towards the end of the transfer market and didn't replace them. So he lost his two best assets and then didn't really get anybody anywhere near as good in return. And then obviously we plummeted down the league, got relegated, and then we recruited well that summer for League One. We got a few players like Greg Docherty and George Honeyman and people like that. I know we were Honeyman the season before, but he'd been down there with Sunderland. And you know, you've got that know-how in League One, and he did a very good job. First league title in 55 years, can't be scoffed at. And then, yeah, like you said, the championship season, I think we'd have probably survived with him. And it was a weird timing for his sacking, I think, because a lot of the people outside of the club thought that the new owner had come in and just instantly sacked him despite his run of results. But it had actually been decided like a few months before. So when the first discussions of the takeover were going on, it was in like the midst of our really bad run, because we won the first game of the season, but went like 10 without winning and scored like one goal or something. And it was made at that point that he was going to try and adhere to the fans and get a new man in. So he'd already made that decision. He'd already got Shota across doing English lessons, and he couldn't really go back on it. But it's like you said, like Joe said, it's more of a fresh start. It was probably best for both parties, because McCann could go on a 6-game unbeaten run, but the moment he lost a game, the entire fan base was at him again. So it was more of a poison chalice for him, and it's probably best for him to find somewhere new where he might be appreciated again. And we get to look forward to potentially a better era under new management and a new ownership.
So obviously you got new owners, new manager, a lot of the same players. You want to make some transfers this season for incomings, but outgoing wise, players such as Keane Lewis for Lewis Keane Potter. How confident are you keeping him at the club?
I wasn't very confident as soon as the season ended, because we've had a couple local journals on the pod before, and they were saying that pretty much his mind was set on Premier League, and like, you can't blame him, same as Bone, really. Like, you know that where his career's heading, and you don't really want to hold them back from it. But the new owner seems to really intent on keeping him, which is a nice change of pace, because we're used to him just offloading them at a nice price that can go in the back pocket and get him a new Lambo. So the fact that he wants to hold on to him and said something like, even 30 million, I wouldn't consider selling him. He's made his stance fairly certain on it. Now, obviously, if Lewis Potter turns around and says, I want to go to the Premier League, then he will probably adhere to that. But the fact of the matter is, the club is trying to keep our best players. They've offered Honeyman another long-term deal as well. We've just tied Ingram down to 3 years with an option of a fourth. And it's finding that stability and keeping the core of the team. But we're also expecting about 9 or 10 new signings, because we released a lot of players as well. Like, we've got no strikers, essentially, because I think we're letting Malik Wilkes go and probably Tyler Smith maybe on a loan system or something. But they're looking at bringing a lot of players in. So you've got to kind of have some familiarity around the ground, because you don't want an entire 11 of new players strung together, because we've seen, you can get many examples across the Football League that does not worked. But yeah, a bit of familiarity added with a new mix of progressive, exciting talents that can help us actually challenge for the top half of the table would be nice to see. And if Keane Lewis Potter's there for it, then it'll be even better.
I mean, for yourself, Joe, obviously Keane Lewis Potter, not Lewis Keane Potter, as I keep wanting to call him. You want him to stay, brilliant player. When you played us, I thought he was one of the best players on the pitch, bar none. You want to keep him there, but if a bid that overestimates the valuation you've got at the club came in, and you could then invest that into the team to bring in more depth of squad, better players to go forward, would you be tempted to accept that bid, or do you think he's one of them players you need to keep at all costs?
So for me, it's very, very difficult to get someone in that's going to replicate what he offers. I think we've been linked in the last few weeks with Scott Twine, and that seems to have some legs on it. Now, my thing is, Scott Twine can play off the left, right-footed, very similar. You look at his goal contributions and his assists that he had last season in League One, very similar to when Keane Lewis Potter really established himself in the Football League, in League One. So is that going to be a case if we can get him in, or are we going to take if a 30 million bid comes in, do we take it? Me personally, I would love to see Keane Lewis Potter stay for one more season. Can we get lads around him and give him a little bit of help? Because at times last season we were running a sort of 5-3-2 system, and Lewis Potter was way out on the left-hand side and very isolated. And you look at some of the bits of skill and his finishing ability and that he bore with no help. If we can get a few lads around him, what can he then offer? But as Ant said, it's me personally, I would love to keep him for another season. If that big bid comes in, I think it's down to the lads. I think you've got to speak to him and look, what do you want to do? I think Akin will be speaking to him and really trying to push for him to tell him to stay, and we will build around you. Obviously, he's from Hull, he loves the club, but at the end of the day, it's professional football, isn't it? And if a big team comes sniffing, I don't want to stop him having that opportunity. You look at the lads that have come through, Robertson, Maguire, Bowen, they've all got their big moves, and it's worked out pretty well in all those cases. So it's a difficult one. I don't think we could replace him. I don't think there'd be anyone you could get in to directly sort of bring what he brings, but it's down to the lad at the end of the day. So we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
One of the players you mentioned was obviously Twine. He's been rumoured to the club. One of the rumours I've also heard, I don't know how honest it is or whether it's just paper talk, is Charlie Austin. I think he's been linked with every club under the sun, hasn't he? Is that the kind of player you want at the club to help bolster, or are you looking more at young, fresher players?
So I think they're having a bit of a really good window so far without actually bringing anyone in. The rumours and that are knocking about. There's word that we're looking at 2 strikers at the minute. Obviously, that's a massive part. And said at the minute we've got no strikers, out and out strikers at the club. I feel like we wouldn't go for someone sort of a Charlie Austin type. We've probably been linked with Charlie Austin for the last 10 seasons, as have every other EFL club, right? Yeah, exactly. So I think we really are trying to sort of make you can't disrespect Charlie Austin, right? He scores goals and he's been a great servant for whatever club he's been at. But maybe either more experienced player, maybe from overseas. And there's been talk about Enwakame. I butchered that. who's at Trabzonspor at the minute, and he's actually just put out a post sort of yesterday thanking the fans and that he's now leaving as a free agent. So I think there's been some talk about him, but again, we're going to be linked with every Turkish striker from the Super League for the next 3 seasons probably. So we'll have to wait and see. But then apparently we had spoken to John Swift, who obviously in the end chose to go to West Brom. Now, it looks like we're trying to do a lot of business sort of in the UK and really keeping that core of sort of British players together, and hopefully trying to attract a few sort of bigger, maybe reputation players from overseas and from Turkey and things like that. So it's looking like we're going to get Ozan Tufan, who obviously came in to Watford last season. He had quite a bad time. If you speak to any Watford fan, they don't have a good thing to say about him. However, I think he was sort of out the favourite Fenerbahce before going to Watford. And then obviously you're going into Watford, who are a struggling Premier League team. If you haven't got any form going into the Premier League, it's going to be very, very difficult to get that form back, isn't it? Playing in the Premier League with a side sort of fighting for relegation. So the names being chucked about are very interesting. So we'll just have to wait and see again. Not much has really come out. Baz Cooper, who sort of works quite closely, and the whole Daily Mail and that hasn't really given too much away. So I think we're going to have to wait and see at the moment. But I would expect us to, if we are going to go for an older experienced player, maybe look overseas. But then it's looking like we're going for lads like Scott Twine that are young and really hungry, sort of from the EFL and things like that. So it's been good so far. Just need to get them through the door now. That's the tough bit.
I mean, obviously for yourself, and you've other than Lewandowski, who's definitely coming to Hull because he's had his photo with the owners recently. What type of player do you want to see at the club? You, as we mentioned, you're going to be linked with every Turkish striker, every Turkish player going due to that connection. Do you want to see more homegrown British youngsters at the club, or do you think you need a few experienced lads in the dressing room to kind of help boost that growing sense of camaraderie that's already there?
Well, I think one of our biggest weaknesses last season was the fact that we didn't really have that many experienced heads. We had a very young side. So a good mix of both, I think, is the key to a successful side. You don't want to tip the scales one way or the other because, you need to mix it perfectly to bring through that raw ability of the youngsters, but then have the level head of the experienced players. Now, there was a big worry, obviously, with the new owners saying about, he wanted to recruit players from Turkey and whatnot, but and they thought that pretty much every transfer would be from there. But from this transfer window, from the looks of it, we have been looking in the English league as well. So he is obviously taking some advice on board and looking with the FL as well, because he probably knows that he needs that know-how and experience within the leagues and to add to the quality that he could attempt to bring over from Turkey, because he's got really good contacts. I mean, I think we've been linked with like Mesut Ozil, Suarez was mentioned at one point. Is pretty ridiculous, but you've just got to you've got to take them all with a pinch of salt. But I mean, there's one transfer that's really interesting at the minute, and like Joe mentioned, Baz. They're on about a big money striker that they're keeping very tight-lipped on. So that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on, because whoever that turns out to be is Adjan's secret weapon, basically, that he wants to help us get into the top 10 with. And then the likes of Seri, who was at Fulham last season. Now, if we can pull off a signing like that as a free agent in the Championship, it just shows the kind of lure that Adjan has. And we've not really had a chance to see how good his persuasional skills are. So this transfer window is going to be a very interesting one to see what kind of caliber of player he can actually attract. Because if we can add to the likes of, Honeyman, and like we said, that Tufan, when I read up on it, he had a really bad pre-season as well, so he wasn't really match fit, so, which might be a contributing factor to why he struggled at Watford. And Adama Traore, a Malian midfielder, rumoured to be coming in as well. There's a lot of international experience, and they're really trying to up the caliber of player at the club. And to me, if you're going to want to progress up the league and challenge for the Premier League within 2 or 3 years, like his vision is, then these are the kind of players we need to be signing.
So before we end it, we'll have 2 quick fire questions for you. I'll start with you, Ant. So First off, which game are you most looking forward to this season?
I don't know, actually. That's caught me off guard. I always enjoy a Yorkshire derby. I'd probably say, do you know what? I'm looking forward to Rotherham away because I've not been to Rotherham away in a long time, and they've got promoted, and it's a good little ground, good atmosphere. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that game.
If you get down there early enough, you can get on Canal Boat, which is basically one long winding piss up as you go to ground. Brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Well worth doing. Second quick fire question. Where are Hull finishing this season?
I don't want to raise my expectations too high because as a fan base, we're very good at doing that. I think I'm going to aim for a nice, safe, mid-table, playoff outsiders kind of thing, but fall too short towards the end. I'd be happy with that as a season. It's something to build on.
So you're essentially going to do a Millwall.
Yeah.
For yourself, Joe, same question first off. Which game are you looking forward to most?
Well, I think it's got to be Rotherham now, isn't it? On that boat. I think you've got to look at going up to Sunderland's always nice, isn't it? Stadium of Light, big club, good fan base. Should be quite a good one. Yeah. And that boat at Rotherham, can't wait for that.
And we're all going to finish this season.
So again, you can't push it too far. I think you've got to look at top half, and then the Championship season can go any way, can't you? Look at Huddersfield and Luton, what they did last season, and then you've got to take it game by game. But I'm going to go for probably 8th or 9th. Like Ant said, you've got a chance of playoffs, but those last 5-10 games, that run in makes all the difference anyway, whether you can stick a playoff spot or not. But I think you've got to look at top half and then take it game by game as you know you're sort of safe and can we push on and really go for something. But yeah, 8th, we'll go for 8th.
Lovely stuff. So we're going to end it here. For any Hull fans watching, if you haven't already, go to the Hull and Back podcast, get subscribed, listen to the lads. Every time I spoke to them, they spoke 99.9% sense. So good luck for the season, obviously, apart from when you play us. And let's hope it's a good one for you.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.